You're recording.
So, do you want me to start, Will, or?
I think we should run through the first two items on the agenda first, Phil.
All right.
So, Steph, start the meeting.
Yes, please.
Okay. So, first of all, an approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for approval?
Sure, I'll do that.
Seconder, Don? All in favor? Hands
Aye.
up. Aye. Carried. Adoption of the minutes, motion. Approval of the minutes.
I'll approve.
Oh, hey,
Bonnie. Yeah.
Seconder,
Sure, David. Yeah.
all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Hi, McKaylee, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Happy New Year, everyone.
Same to you.
Happy New Year.
Okay, so the next is no public comments. We do have a delegation, Dr. Phil Gregory and Dr. Bruce Lanphear. I hope I said that correctly, Bruce. So take it away, team.
Right. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. Bruce and I are both part of the BIF's pesticide subcommittee. We're a big organization now. We've got our subcommittees. And the other members of the subcommittee are Rabia Wilcox and Shasta Martinique and Bill Lighthead. So just the two of us are going to be here today, I understand. And I've got about 15 slides, PowerPoint slides that I will start with. And then Bruce will make some comments after that. So we've been asked to talk about the effect of pesticides on health and the food supply. And as you know, BIF stands for Bowen Island Food Resilience Society. And so we see that as an essential aspect of our concerns. And so let me just give you an outline of what I propose to go over, starting with just one slide on our chemical warfare against nature. And then we'll get into the history of municipal pesticide bans in Canada. And then I will make a short case for a cosmetic pesticide ban on Bowen. And I want to highlight that we're very fortunate to have Bruce Lanphear as a committee member because he's an expert on health impacts on children. And he's also an advisor for non-toxic neighborhoods. And then after that, we'll talk a bit about the BIF's Cosmetic Pesticide Survey that we carried out during the summer. And there's one tag end to this discussion having to do with invasive species. What do we do about invasive species? So let's get on with it. And I'm just going to read over this one. For too long, we've relied on the technology of industrial agriculture to carry out warfare against weeds, insects, microbes, and more generally nature, only to discover that we have less than 60 years of farming remaining due to soil degradation, and we are experiencing an explosive growth of chronic diseases that are epidemic in scale and strongly correlated to agricultural chemical use. To date, there's over 30 of these explosive chronic diseases that have been identified. And some of the common ones that most people will recognize are diabetes, obesity, asthma, ADHD, autism, celiac disease, Crohn's disease, and cancer. So among the arsenal of chemicals used in this war are pesticides, and they include herbicides for weeds, insecticides for insects, fungicides, and rodenticides for rodents. So all of those categories fall under the term pesticide. and 90% of pesticides are used in agriculture. So how many of these pesticides have been approved in Canada? As of 2016, the number was 7,355, and it goes up every year. Okay, so how has society reacted to this? Well, it started in 1991 with a small town of Hudson, Quebec. They decided to pass a bylaw banning pesticides in their municipality. And of course, it was challenged by all the senior levels of government, but it was finally upheld by the Supreme Court. So the Hudson ruling stands. And now over 180 towns in Canada, including big cities like Vancouver, have similar bylaws banning some or all pesticides for cosmetic purposes, such as lawn and garden beautification. 7 of the 10 provinces in Canada have introduced legislation banning some or all pesticides for cosmetic purposes, but not BC, Alberta, or Saskatchewan as yet. So apart from the obvious health consideration, Bowen is planning for a municipal composting operation, and we would like to see pesticides minimized. So we want to minimize the pesticide contamination in the input stream. So I've just listed in this table all of the municipalities in BC that have currently have their own pesticide ban. And it started with Port Moody in 2003, and some of the more recent ones are in 2012, but Vancouver joined in 2006. And it's interesting to note that the unincorporated Southern Gulf Islands are covered by the pesticide ban of the Capital Regional District. However, incorporated islands like our own are an exception, so we're not covered at all. So here's a brief case being made here for cosmetic pesticide ban, some of the evidence. And for more evidence, you can click on that poster that I created, that I shared, I believe, with the Muni as well. But basically, if you take the top 30 commonly used lawn pesticides, you find that 16 are possible and are known carcinogens. 17 have a potential to disrupt endocrine systems, and on you go. In fact, all 30 have at least one of these problems. So nothing comes through unscathed in the top 30. And then as far as environmental considerations, 19 are detected in our groundwater, 20 have the ability to leach into drinking water sources, 22 are toxic to birds, 30 are toxic to fish and other aquatic organisms vital to our ecosystem. So they're all toxic to fish. 29 are toxic to bees, and 14 are toxic to mammals. So that's data from the US. We get better statistics generally from them. And 25 of these pesticides are registered for use in Canada. So it's largely true of Canada as well. So a moment on glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup. And this is the most heavily used pesticide in the world. It's such a highly effective herbicide. It's capable of killing basically all life on Earth. We used to think that mammals were the exception, and that's before we discovered the human microbiome, where the number of cells in our body are outnumbered by the number of microbes living in our bodies. And microbes are prime targets for glyphosate. It's in our water, soil, and air, just no escaping from it. It's very persistent in the environment despite advertising to the contrary. And here I've listed 2 court cases. In 1996, New York sued Monsanto over the claim its herbicide, including Roundup, were safer than table salt, practically non-toxic, environmentally friendly, and biodegradable. Monsanto lost the case and agreed to remove the advertising claims and agreed to pay $50,000 to cover the state prosecution costs. Well, breaking news in on December 28th of just last year, the New York State Governor Cuomo signed the statewide glyphosate ban, first in the country. So you're no longer allowed to use glyphosate anywhere on state land in the state of New York. Then in 2001, there was a French court case which accused Monsanto of falsely presenting Roundup as a biodegradable and claiming it left the soil clean after use. Well, that was fought through in 2 lower court cases in which the decisions went against Monsanto, but of course it's always going to go to the next highest case. And so finally in 2009, the French Supreme Court ruled against Monsanto. And then in 2015, the World Health Organization declared glyphosate as a probable carcinogen. And that led to a series, like I think there's been 3 or 4 to date in California, prosecutions of Monsanto. And the biggest ruling was $2 billion for a couple over a cancer claim. So, but you know, that doesn't stop it being approved by the EPA in the US and Health Canada in Canada. So it's on the books at the moment for probably another 13 years of use in Canada. And it was also approved in Europe, unfortunately, but they are now attempting to rescind that approval. Okay, so I'd like to move on here to show you the user-friendly version of Richmond's bylaw. So it's pesticide control bylaw. And it basically goes into most of the issues or questions that the public would have. And it mentions on the far right-hand side, and I can't actually read this anymore because it's slightly off my screen, but these are the top right, those are the pesticides that can be used. In other words, the province has restricted the pesticides that municipalities can ban. And so there are a number, it's a small number compared to the total that's been approved in Canada, that we cannot ban in our municipal, well, if we can ban them, but if anybody challenges it, we don't have a legal case to stand on. So most municipalities haven't banned those. And then the bottom right, it shows some natural and permitted pesticide solutions to common pest problems. Now I'm going to go into this a little bit more detail, so you won't have to try and read this microscopic writing. So the bylaw does not apply to the management of pests that transmit human or animal diseases, the management of pests that impact agriculture or forestry, and it does not apply to the use of these pesticides on buildings or on the outsides or the insides of buildings, or on ALR properties, the agricultural land reserve used for farming, including the residential areas of farms. It doesn't apply to land use for forestry, transportation, public utilities, or pipelines, unless the municipality owns those pipelines. And it doesn't apply to golf courses. So even if we decide to go ahead with a cosmetic pesticide ban, it will not cover these activities. Are all pesticides now restricted? Well, as I mentioned, there is the provincial government has an excluded list, which are listed in the link below. And those are still permitted. Plus, certain biological controls are also permitted. So you could ask the question, well, how do I know if a pesticide is restricted or permitted? And well, there's a very large number of them, so it's a difficult question to answer completely, but most common active ingredients, some examples of which are listed here, some of the worst cases, are now restricted under the bylaw. And there are other, if you go to those 30 pesticides that are used on lawns, most of those are in this list as well that would be excluded. So during the summer of this past year, BIFs carried out a pesticide survey just to find out what fellow citizens thought. And I submitted that, and Bonnie has a copy of it. And I believe you're intending to put that on the municipal website. And so I encourage you to have a look at that. And we go into a lot more detail here. I'm just going to briefly summarize some of the findings. Our survey got responses back from 143 Bowen Islanders. And we're not obviously making the claim that the results are unbiased. 11% of the 143 respondents have children 12 years and younger, and about 83% of the respondents grow food on Bowen. And among the many responses to the survey, our daughter died young from a rare form of cancer. Hope people will follow up on cancer diagnoses from the use of Roundup. And several people raised the question of pesticide use for invasive plants. I'd like to see glyphosate removed from domestic use, only to be used by professionals for invasives, e.g. injecting Japanese knotweed. And one report includes a section on invasive plants. So our report also includes a section on invasive plant considerations, giving examples of how Coquitlam, Delta, and North Vancouver deal with invasive plants. And the city of Delta apparently has had a bylaw on that regard, which dates back to when the rail lines were put in, right? So some of these are very old bylaws. So here's two examples of graphical survey results. And I'll just draw your attention to the one on the right, which is the question number 10. Would you support a ban on pesticides on Bowen if there were safe and effective alternatives? And you can see that overwhelmingly the response was yes. So I'd like just to close with including the links to two short, excellent videos that Bruce Lanphear has produced, which I hope you'll have the time later on to follow up on. One of them is entitled "The Impact of Toxins on the Developing Brain," and the other one is called "Cause or Cure." So that pretty well completes what I had to say. And Bruce, do you want to add some comments at this time?
Yeah, just very briefly, just to add, most of my work has been on the health impacts of exposures to a variety of toxic chemicals, including pesticides. And we now have pretty good evidence that pesticides are associated with decrements in children's learning abilities when the exposures happen prenatally, as well as autism from agricultural drift. And as well for pesticides and childhood leukemia if the exposures happen during pregnancy. So we have a lot of evidence. We have been regulating these chemicals, many of these chemicals, without adequate evidence to show that they're safe. So
Sorry, Bruce, can I interrupt you?
Yes.
Phil, if you don't have another slide to show, do you want to close your slides and we can see Bruce smoothly?
That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Okay.
Thank you.
Stop share. Yeah.
Here we go.
What typically happens is that a company will provide evidence, maybe from a few rodent studies in the laboratory, and convince the regulatory agencies that they're safe. And yet what we then have to do, and what my job is, basically, we go out and study pregnant women, others study other people of other ages, and we follow up what happens once pregnant women are exposed and whether their children are at risk for certain brain-based disorders or carcinogen or cancer. And more often than not, why we've gotten rid of lead arsenate as the original pesticide, and then DDT, and now OP pesticides are on the block to be banned. And of course, those have been replaced by things like Roundup and neonicotinoids and pyrethroids, but there's already growing evidence that those are toxic. And so more and more we're pushing towards ways not only to make our homes beautiful, our gardens beautiful, but to get rid of some of these toxic chemicals in agriculture. Up until a few years ago, the belief was that we need these toxic chemicals to grow enough food to feed the world. And it's now been very clearly shown that that's not true. So this is one very simple, easy step we can take that doesn't even address issues about making sure there's enough food, but just for making things pretty in our home and saying, we don't need these. There's clear established risk for some of the pesticides, and there's a lot of questions about the safety of other ones. 90 to 95% of the chemicals used in commerce have not been sufficiently tested for toxicity, and yet they're continually used. Why? Because the way the regulatory system is set up is you cannot regulate these toxic chemicals until you have shown consistently in human studies and laboratory studies that they're toxic. So by default, what we're doing is using our children, pregnant women, all of us as sort of these guinea pigs. And this is one simple step we can take, and Phil's laid it out. A number of municipalities have taken these steps and sort of shown the way. It's relatively straightforward and a simple thing to do to move us in the direction of reducing the toxic chemicals in our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce and Phil. Are there any questions from members of the committee? My first question is going to be, what are you hoping that our committee will do after your presentation, Phil?
Well, I would really like to see this moved, end up being moved by council. So I guess they're going to look to your committee for a recommendation. And that could be simply passing along what we've presented to reinforcing what we've presented. But it would be very nice to see a bylaw introduced. And there are lots of templates of bylaws, of course, that are available. So that's would be my ultimate hope, is that we would have a bylaw here on Bowen.
McKaylee.
To suggest that in conjunction with bringing in the bylaw, we also have some proactive measures or procedures on how to support people actually getting rid of what they already have in their homes or in their driveways or wherever they're storing these things, just to make sure that they're disposed of properly. There's a tendency to dump things in the creek, and I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Excellent point. David, do you have any comments?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you both for the presentations. I think what would be best would be a recommendation, and building on what McKaylee said, a recommendation to council that we ask staff to, I'm not sure to introduce a cosmetic pesticide ban on Bowen Island. I think that would be great to get going on that. As folks have said, there's lots of, other municipalities have done that after Hudson did it years ago. So, and I hadn't seen that Richmond piece that you showed, Phil. I thought that was a pretty nice communication piece that showed, what you can do and can't do, and some of the ways of dealing with some of the issues that we all have, from pill bugs to slugs and so on in our gardens. So I'd love a recommendation from someone on that. I think that would be great. And I don't see any problem whatsoever in council moving forward on that. I think everyone would agree with this data.
I'm going to ask Bonnie, do you have any comments too? Is Bonnie here?
Sure. Yeah. Hi. Sorry, I'm just plugging my computer in. Just 1 second here. So I think what Phil presented, I think it fits nicely with the compost facility potential that's happening. We'll soon be applying for a grant for that facility to see that go forward. So it does sort of fit nice with that, just ensuring that there's reduced pesticides within our compost that we produce. Maybe it's just a suggestion for the committee. Maybe the recommendation could say that staff explore different options to establish a pesticide or do research. So just a little bit lesser than, and staff could then come back to council with some options and some research from different municipalities. Just one comment as well, I believe, and probably Phil and Bruce, you would know better, but I think I read that Richmond is trying out for a year. They're going to try a pilot for a year of rodenticides as well. So as the manager of environment here, I do hear concerns from some public community members about rodenticides, getting into the food web, as well as the pesticides, the cosmetic pesticides as well. So yeah, those are my comments.
So I'm going to ask Steph if she in the background has typed up a motion.
Do you want to say whereas blah 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 composting, or whereas other municipalities have bans, or just leave it simple? I'll pull it up.
I saw Dawn's hand up at one point. Dawn, did you have something?
I just, I thought it was a great presentation, but I guess I'm a little stunned. Rachel Carlson was talking about this in 1962. And we're having a discussion about banning Roundup. It just seems like it's an obvious, and it's a pretty simple resolution, I think.
Yeah, I'm seeing the names of chemicals that when I was in university, we were talking about having them banned, and that's like when the mastodons were wandering steppes. So yeah, it's time.
So the simple one, that the committee recommend that council direct staff to conduct research and explore options to establish a cosmetic pesticide ban on Bowen Island.
That's nice and solid and short and sweet.
And just not bother with any whereases.
I'm assuming, knowing staff, that they would be immediately on to looking at what other communities and jurisdictions are doing.
That would be in
how
the
do you feel,
report.
Bonnie? Yeah, Bonnie's giving a thumb up. It's understood.
Okay, we can't see you, all of us, Bonnie.
Jeff, did you have a comment?
Bonnie, were you thinking that perhaps rodenticide was appropriate in this motion, or was that just a bookmark for future consideration?
Yeah, I think it's up to the committee, but I don't know. It's up to the committee. I mean, would it be a good thing? Yes, I think so, but I don't know if we want to start with cosmetic pesticide ban, and maybe we could look to Richmond with their, their year-long. Bruce and Phil, am I correct in that statement? Because I just read it in passing. Do you know anything about the rodenticide ban that Richmond's moving towards?
Okay, so I have to say that I was not aware that was not already included because pesticides do include rodenticides. So it's my assumption that was a part of even the Richmond bylaw.
Yeah, so let's leave it like that, and then let staff decide how best to include it in the report.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll bounce back across this committee table. Again.
Yeah, so I guess too, like as I say, yeah, thank you for that clarification, because do we want to look at herbicides or do we want to include rodenticides? I mean, if we do have pesticides, giving that as the overarching term, yeah, I guess if we wanted to leave it at that, it is far reaching, pesticides.
Yeah, my understanding is pesticides include insecticides, herbicides, rodenticides, avicides, if you want to kill birds. So that's how you see it too, Phil, is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think, beginning with Richmond, I think all the work that Phil did suggested that they were probably amongst the most progressive, perhaps because they had done it more recent than some other municipalities, but that would be a good place to start to look for a template.
And they were also very responsive, so they'd be happy to help. And they were very, open.
Yeah. Any further discussion?
Maureen,
I haven't heard from you. Do you have any additions?
No, I don't. I'm just pleased to see this come forward. I know Phil's been working on it for a while, or it's been a front of mind topic. So I'm pleased to see it, and I'm happy to support the recommendation.
Yeah. Well, McKaylee.
Thank you. I just wanted to also add to this that maybe the municipalities should look at what that cosmetic ban would cover in the way of works. I know that there has been the use of glyphosate on Japanese knotweed in the vicinity of the old fire hall, and that was done by the municipality because there's quite a large infestation there. So some of this research should also include alternatives that the municipalities could use in the road right of way.
And just to point out that one of the things that Non-Toxic Neighborhoods is doing, they're working across the world on this, is in addition to thinking about how to control certain things, they're also trying to promote the use of plants that are native that won't require as much pesticide control. So that's one option to think about.
Yeah. Okay, any further comments or questions from the committee?
I was going to add a little bit, but I think, remember what we're doing here is we're making the initial recommendation to council, then council sends it to staff, then all these additional ideas that can all be part of what staff comes back with in the final report that would go to council to then get approved. I think keeping it at a high level, like we already have at this stage, is the appropriate way to go, because then it just goes from council to staff. Then they can do the kind of work that we're talking about dealing with some of the more complicated issues.
And probably there will be a chance for this committee to look at any
the details.
So in that case, I'm going to say thank you, Phil and Bruce, for coming and giving your presentation. It was great to see this put in one chunk for us, and I'm sure that there will be more of this kind of thing coming from you folks. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for listening to us.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay.
I didn't get a vote.
Oh, we have the thank you, Steph. I was too excited. Yes, do we have a motion?
Yeah. That the Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee recommend that council direct staff to conduct research and explore options to establish a cosmetic pesticide ban on Bowen Island.
Do we have a motion? Who's okay?
Oh, sorry.
Don has made the motion. Seconder? McKaylee. And okay, all in favor, hands up.
Aye.
Carried unanimously. Thank you. So
fantastic. So the next item was the green buildings.
Yep.
And it was covered last month or last meeting. So are you okay to can do that without Daniel? Having had him presenting last meeting? Yeah.
Any comments from committee members?
Yes, from me.
And from me too, yeah.
I think it would be important to have Daniel here for the discussion.
Okay.
I agree too. I've got some questions that my review, well, I've reviewed it and I've got some questions. So I think there's others that will as well. So yeah, Bonnie?
Yeah, that's great. We could defer to next meeting. I just wanted to bring up something that I found interesting. I was talking to the manager of Recreation and Community Services, Jillian, and she's been looking at the design for the community center. And there's some great work out there for building design to reduce bird strikes, given that the community center has a lot of windows. Yep. And is in a forested setting. So I think one of the discussions, correct me if I'm wrong, from last time when we preliminarily heard Daniel present on the green building policy, is that we were wondering sort of the scope of it and whether or not things like bird deterrence, I don't know if that fits within the scope, but I did find our conversation very interesting. Jillian and I talked about it quite at length, and there are some good models elsewhere in different jurisdictions for building best practices on lots of fronts to protect wildlife and all sorts of things, plus energy saving.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I was seeing is the impact on nature was not as strongly covered, but in this this bylaw. So not sure if, and you know, I always have strong views lightly held, so I can always be convinced of changing those views. So I think that discussion would be useful with Daniel there. And we have counselors that and staff that have deeper knowledge on the things that can constrain us on these suggestions as well. So
I can share these notes with him then, so he'll be prepared for next time if anyone else has more comments.
Shall we move on?
Okay.
Okay, looks like it's election time.
Every year.
Yep. So I guess the question is there anybody who would like to be chair? The stampede is shocking. So if I stood for chair, there would I'll stand for chair. So shall we? Do I have to ask 3 times like in a public meeting? Steph?
It's for a mover and a seconder, and I'll call the question.
Okay.
This is when we all push them forward.
Motion, David seconded. All in favor? Great. Vice chair. I think Jeff Matheson is a great vice chair and much better than vice presidents in other countries. So I move that Jeff be the vice chair.
Happy to second.
Is that okay with you, Jeff?
Yeah, I do. The only duty is to overthrow you in the case of any kind of gross,
that's right. And I'm watching you.
Gross dereliction of duties, and I'll do that enthusiastically if it's required. But I don't see that occurring.
All right. So in favor? Okay, elections are done. So we're next into updates. Staff update from Bonnie.
Nope, so we have new business. I think there was an article from Metro Vancouver.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Carbon. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So
So
I
that's
just plugged the councillors' names on that. I was a little vague on who was going to take the lead, but both seemed to.
David and Marie.
Mhm.
Sure, I could. Maureen wanted to have a have this on the agenda, but I could just say a couple of words. So this came through the Climate Action Committee at Metro Vancouver probably a year ago, don't remember. And it struck me as really interesting. Basically, it's able to look at every parcel of land in Metro Vancouver, and by the analysis that had been done, look at the amount of carbon that's stored in each. And Bowen Island is on the map and it's showing very strong carbon storage. And of course, it's because of our forests. So Bonnie asked me a question about, I forwarded this to Bonnie, or Bonnie had to look at it. Anyway, she asked me for some details. And when you go into that article, the one that's in the link, you can't actually figure out the details because it's just at a higher level. So I asked Metro Vancouver staff to get to Bonnie the way of actually figuring out what the carbon storage would be per parcel. And Bonnie now has that, but this is more complicated this is a more complex process and something I could do. But I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie and say, Bonnie, is this understandable, or is this so hard that it's really hard for anyone to figure out?
Yeah, you know, I have some comments. It is pretty complex, right? It's I believe that it's I like the graphic images in that it gives sort of a it's a management tool. Now, I don't know the reason, the genesis of wanting to sort of delve into what sort of data and data sets were out there and information on carbon storage is just because we're doing our SEEP update, and it'd be nice to have some sort of knowledge behind what we have here. But not only is the one paper that I read from Metro and then some other little bits and pieces, is it complex? I just don't know its relevance, other than it does give a general sense for decision making. But then it's also, you look at the precautionary principle, and we know that when we remove carbon, trees, and disturb soil, we are disrupting carbon sequestration cycles. I also contacted the Islands Trust Fund and did get some information from them. Again, really not, I would say, highly useful information, to be blunt. Again, sort of just a general decision-making tool. There is a new tool out by somebody at University of Victoria that does, again, sort of drill down a little bit further, that may give some more like numbers and specifics for a parcel of land and what carbon sequestration values it may have. I think when there's high carbon sequestration values, it's tightly aligned with biodiversity. And that's sort of linked in a lot of the articles I've read. But the bottom line is, I don't think there's really good evaluations. I mean, there's evaluations. How useful are they in everyday life, sort of thing, other than maybe a high level decision-making tool? That's just sort of something I'd like to summarize.
Yep.
I'd like to just add a little bit. What I was hoping to be able to do when I first saw this is, one of the things that always gets into my brain is the intent to log parts of Bowen Island. And you know, when we looked at that 2-3 years ago, whenever that was, you know, we realized that the economics were pretty slim in any event, just because of the cost of doing it. But if you were then to take the carbon storage and you multiply that by, say, a carbon tax of, let's say, $170, which is what the federal carbon tax would be in 2030, in 9 years, you could get, you know, you have a heck of a lot of value sitting in those hectares of forests. So I guess I see it as a defensive mechanism in terms of land use decisions.
Yeah. Maureen?
Yeah, I think it's that, but I think it's also, and I hope I have this straight, I can double check, but Metro Vancouver, I believe, uses this kind of data to support their argument that they are good GHG citizens. So it goes, the extent to which they can protect goes towards their carbon credits, and bolsters their position as a regional district that protects.
I can speak to that a tiny bit. It's complicated. It's complicated, Maureen. It depends if there is a threat to change that land. If there's a clear threat that that land would be logged or changed in some way or another, and you can prevent it, then you can account for that. But if it's already protected in watersheds, which is what a whole lot of the Metro Vancouver forests are, then you can't count those numbers because you're already doing it. In other words, it has to be additive in order to be able to take a number and say, hey, we're adding this to our, whatever, our GHG plan. So it's complicated. I actually had a discussion with Liam about this, and he's quite familiar with the details because, of course, I'm always looking for ways to throw some numbers into things to protect stuff. And it
For members of the committee, Liam is our Chief Administrative Officer at the
meeting. Yeah. So it's complicated, but it's important data that can help us if need be. Now, there isn't a plan to log Bowen Island right now, but there might be. It could come again, and then to take that carbon storage data, multiply it by a carbon price. And by the way, Metro Vancouver, in decisions about projects, they use a shadow carbon price of $150, $125, $150, and to decide on whether to do a project or not. And at the time, I thought, wow, $150, that's great. But now we're going to have a carbon tax higher than that from the federal government in 9 years. So using that carbon price in economic decisions is an important way to protect things.
Bonnie?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm just going to read this, but this is the potential applications that I've come across for carbon storage databases. And so using the database as a basis for predicting other ecosystem services, using the database for change detection, and using database as management tool to guide decision-making. And but I love the economic aspect of things for sure. But those are the three benefits I see, or the three applications from a lot of these data sets.
One of the things I notice on page 41 of the report, it says that there's two versions of the raster database at resolutions of 2 meters and 50 meters. And what we're seeing in the report is the 50-meter maps. And 2 meters, it starts to get so that if we're looking at a development like Cape Roger Curtis or something like that, we can see that the impact of some of the forest clearing that a developer would do as part of the impact on Bowen's carbon budget. And so, and if there was a price on that too, the carbon price that could be levied against that, if the objective of the carbon budget is to maintain as much carbon sequestration on Bowen as possible, this could be a tool for the municipality to deal with developers too on some of these larger developments, and perhaps even on a single large property. So I see it as a model that this is a model that could be fine-tuned for a municipality like Bowen Island. And it would probably require some input from a university department, a grad student or something like that. But there's some potential here for applying this metro model to something that fits our community. Bonnie.
Michaeli, if you're there, I know in the SEEP small groups, there was some talk when I wasn't in that group, but it just about, and Liam was familiar with the theory of charging perhaps for trees or putting into a sort of a conservation bank or something. Michaeli, I know you've talked a lot about this potential. So are you there to speak on your thoughts about that?
And I was debating whether or not now is the time to bring it up or to bring it up as extra business later on in the meeting. So I'll speak to it now if that's what you'd like me to do. I have experience working in California, and there they actually have, and it's federal, state, as well as city or county, which is how they operate, organizations that actually do, it's called mitigation banking. And so for developers or people that want to build within their property, they provide funds, or there's a few ways to go about it. One of it's to restore existing habitat within the property to a natural habitat. Another one is to enhance existing habitat, so garbage removal or weed removal or something along those lines. Another one is restoration, where they actually recreate wetlands, and there's some science behind that those habitats are terribly challenging to recreate. So I'm going to sort of set that aside and say that maybe not, that wetlands are sort of more precious, especially here on Bowen, but something like a mitigation bank, where instead of the property owner working with the QEP to create this plan, they buy themselves out of having to do that. So they donate funds to the municipality to hold in trust and to put towards these projects. And that can be things like the funds would then be available for purchasing lands for parks or restoring existing parks. And that can be weed removal or garbage cleanup days, or in the case of if there's a riparian area, restoring the riparian habitat within the SPIA or what have you. In the case of the new park in Cape Roger Curtis, where they've bulldozed in the roads and things like that, basically replanting or revegetating some of those areas, or even protecting some of those sensitive ecosystems within the park. So the idea is then that if a developer wants to impact X number of acres of habitat type, they then buy per acre a restoration and donate that money, basically write a check to the municipality to hold in trust to decide what to do with this. And there would have to be some clear guidelines around what that money is used for, and clear guidelines around, you know, where the bank is kept and how that funds changes into projects, and maybe some feedback or reporting or something like that. And then also the tree, which is a separate issue. Actually, let me back up a little bit. I had a project very recently. A lot of my projects, for those that don't know, I'm an environmental consultant here on island. And some of my work is actually retroactive, where the property owner or the developer has gone through and bladed something without the appropriate permits, and then it's after the fact. So damage has already been done. So in a lot of cases, it's, you know, put some straw down, protect it, try and get our permits after the fact. Whereas there isn't any recourse for saying, okay, well, this has been done and it's been done in this environmentally sensitive area. This is what we would like you to do. And it would be not only the avoidance minimization measures to offset those impacts, but donating some funds to help offset impacts in to be used at a later date. I had an instance out on Grafton Road where they cleared a bunch of riparian habitat associated with Terminal Creek, and there's been some talk about he bladed in a roadway and had this cut slope that he put in. And in my opinion, then deactivating the road that he already put in without the permits would be more invasive or more detrimental than just leaving it. But then he got what he wanted, and there's no anything for that. So to say, okay, well, you did this, there's already an established per square meter rule, and we're going to count how many meters were removed or impacted, and then we're going to use that money to restore habitat within Terminal Creek, either upstream or downstream, however that looks. So to be able to have that recourse or that agency, I guess, would be great. And then for the tree removal, in this instance, he removed a bunch of alder trees. And what I would like to say is, maybe don't plant them there. There was a reason he removed them, but then he's responsible for replacing alder trees at a different location within his property. Or, if it's alder, do a 3-to-1 ratio. If he's going to replace it with cedar or something else that might grow there, do a 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 ratio, because it's a higher value tree with a longer carbon sequestration to it. Look at approaching it that way as well. So I just, my experience, and I just wanted to put that out there and see if that's something that we would be interested in talking about.
Comments?
Sorry.
I like the idea. The thing I wonder about is jurisdiction, and if I know there's a case with Quarry Park that a land developer had built a dam on a river, and it was actually the province that stepped in and required him to do a whole bunch of remedial work. And I think Quarry Park is one of the results of that remediation that had to be done. But I guess the point being is I think it's a great idea to have consequences for impacting land without permission. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to explore this further for sure. And I've certainly heard lots of talk about, habitat or mitigation banking. I'm aware that the Port of Vancouver has a habitat banking program there where the port tenants, those that operate the different terminals and facilities in there, when they do shoreline development, they pay into or somehow offset impacts by paying into their habitat banking program so that they can do larger restoration projects than they could on a piecemeal basis. Kaylee or anybody else, are you aware of any other municipalities in BC that have taken this on?
No, the mitigation is usually offset for impacts when other laws come into play. So for Water Sustainability Act, if there's going to be impacts within the riparian area, for example, relocating a drainage or clearing to the bank or what have you, the province usually gets involved then, and they'll expect a mitigation plan to offset impacts. Same with DFO, but at a municipal level, no, I don't.
So it looks to me that there's some appetite to explore this further. Shall we resolve to continue this discussion in further meetings? Steph, do we need to make a motion, or is just this statement of resolution good enough?
I'll just say by unanimous consent, decided to discuss further at the next meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
Maureen.
How does this relate to the work plan? Bonnie, do we have a current version of our work plan?
Yeah, Maureen, I'm going to come back next. We have last year's work plan,
Okay.
but I haven't developed sort of a carried over yet. I meant to have that done for today, and it hasn't been done. So I do hope to bring the work plan that was a major sort of item on next agenda, our next meeting. So yeah, I would like to look at everything that we didn't have in 2020 that we didn't complete and bring those over, knowing that we are going to do the CEP update as well, and there'll be some commitments there. So yeah, I think that we could include it in the discussion of the work plan next meeting, if that sounds good, and see where we can go, see what we have and what time and resources that we have to fulfill everything.
And part of the reason I'm asking is that we have upcoming, it's probably going to be February now, strategic planning workshop with council. And for any of these ideas to actually get any traction, it would be good to have them in that work plan so that council can see what the big picture is in terms of what we've been able to accomplish and what we would like to accomplish in the coming year.
So I also, between now and then, do you know when in February that is going to be?
We don't have the specific date set at this point. I think there was some discussion of late January, but that's obviously not going to happen because we'll need a poll. I don't think it'll go as late as March. Dave, did you? I didn't hear March. I heard February.
Yeah, I heard February too, but we haven't got a date yet. So I mean, we're almost at February. So like late January is done. Yeah.
Because what I could do is put together a tentative draft work plan for 2021 and circulate it to the committee within the next week. So then we'll have if everybody is willing to contribute to that, that would be, at least give some sense in case we don't meet before your strategic plan session.
Great idea, Bonnie. So getting back to the carbon storage data set, any further discussion? One of the things that I really liked about it was it identified the need for spending more time looking at eelgrass. And eelgrass is important to Bowen, both for environmental reasons and for the whole ecology of Howe Sound. There's eelgrass is, to make a tired statement, as diverse as tropical rainforest and has a lot of environmental values and carbon sequestering importance too. And we are just beginning to know about the extent of eelgrass around Bowen, with some more in-depth work done by the Sea Change Society and the replanting of eelgrass in Mannion Bay and that kind of thing. So I really think that that's an important part of the carbon sequestering model for Bowen Island too. Even though it's small, we don't have huge beds, but it's still really important. So I'm Maureen.
Could I share my screen for a moment, Steph? Let me see.
You have the power?
I have the power. Okay. Great, thanks. I just wanted to show the attached spreadsheet, and some of you may be familiar with this, but this is the it's the 2012 CEEI from the province, and this is the last one that I'm aware is available. So it's like data from 9 years ago. But for the first time since they started presenting this online, we actually have these categories for deforestation. So that has not cropped up, these ones. That has not cropped up in these reports previously. So it gives you a sense of sort of how they're looking at it, you know, the impacts from hydro and industrial and so forth. It looks super dodgy as far as data is concerned, but the categories are at least are there. And I haven't been able to find out what the timelines are for subsequent years to crop up. I wondered if anybody else knows more about this. Anybody? Okay. Anyway, the categories are there. They are somewhat baffling. The 2,426 in terms of municipal deforestation doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to me. So it might be worth doing a little bit of digging. This would have been subsequent to the work. Now it would have been in the middle of the work at Cape Roger Curtis. So the next batch of data would be interesting to take a look at. Anyway, thought I would share that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, Maureen. Sorry, well, can I just chime in? Thanks for bringing that up, Maureen. I think it's great. It's encouraging that the categories are there. So that's really good. But also too, what I've been meaning to do, and just if anybody's ever in the hall in non-COVID times, in the hallway, we've got some great images of some ortho images of Bowen Island that over time, and I do want to get our most recent up there. But what's dramatic is just seeing the canopy loss over time. So it's that graphic is like, wow. And so I really, that's just sort of something that I really want to get up there, because I know Metro has shown some really good, they've got some really great graphics of canopy loss over time. And we've got them in our hallway here. So if you're ever up here, just take a look. Dramatic.
It's almost something I'd love to see put into an animation. You know how you can do it in Google Earth, that you can look at an area and have it change over time. And so that would be a great graphic to have on the website, the municipal website.
There is some of that in the conservation development video that John Reed and John Dowler worked on.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I'd just like to add one little bit more to this this discussion. From a climate change perspective, you know, we've got Metro Vancouver, Bowen Island, federal government, provincial government, the United States probably. Everybody's now talking about getting to carbon zero by 2050 because of the IPCC reports. If you look at any of the graphs of emission reductions, it's astonishingly difficult. You know, you look at what needs to be done, and the whole issue of carbon storage is going to become more and more important, because it can't be done without a clear understanding of making sure we're not losing any more and we are gaining as much as we possibly can. So that looking at Will said, when Will said, you know, we can get down to 2 meters and actually look at carbon storage, the impacts of carbon storage or the loss of it in land use decisions can become quite critical over time. So I think, you know, you're right, Will. We probably need to find ourselves a grad student. The info from Metro Vancouver, there's all the details on how to figure it out, but you know, it requires somebody who actually can spend some time on that to figure it out when you're looking at parcels of land. So I think over time, this will become more and more important. And so we need to just be aware of what the opportunities are.
Yeah. Good point, David. Thank you. Well, shall we move on? Any more discussion? I think that was a great discussion we had on this one. So, and I think we're going to be talking about it more. So let's go on to updates and staff updates from Bonny.
I just wanted to mention there's stories from the Bay is happening with sea change. They're the folks that planted the eelgrass and have the demo midline float buoy in Mannion Bay. And so Stories from the Bay is happening at from 6 to 7:30 on Wednesday evening. And there is a link, it's on our events page. However, the time is a bit wrong. It's wonky on our events page. So we're trying to rectify that. It went into Eastern Standard Time. But yeah, so just that would be a really great event. And then just, I think it's on the next council meeting, the 25th. Carla and I will be bringing forward our grant, or we'll be seeking authorization to apply for the Clean BC infrastructure, composting infrastructure grant from council. We'll be seeking that, start the ball rolling. So if for those of you, I think everybody knows, but the Clean BC grant potentially could pay for up to 2/3 of the capital costs for the project.
Great. And just in addition to the Stories of Mannion Bay, the Nature Club is having a presentation by Fiona Beattie about eelgrass restoration and the ecology of Howe Sound at our AGM on the 26th. So if you're interested, you can have a look at the Nature Club website too. Okay, update from Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Will. You have a link to the council meeting highlights in the agenda. The 2 points that were particularly relevant to this committee discussed at the last council meeting were correspondence that came from BC Timber Sales from the Chilliwack district, outlining the proposed logging for the next 5 years or so. We were pleased that Bowen Island did not appear to be included anywhere in the materials, but we also decided that we would write to BC Timber Sales expressing our gratitude that we were not included in the event that we had overlooked something. So we wanted it on record that we were happy and this was our understanding, basically. And then the second item that was relevant to this committee was our recommendation regarding the My Sea to Sky graphic report card. And the outcome of that was simply that council directed staff to keep an eye on the project going forward, but not to make any commitment, financial or staff time at the moment. But we would just keep an eye on it and see what seemed to be appropriate in the longer term.
Great. Thank you, Maureen.
Welcome.
Transportation Advisory Committee, Councillor Hocking.
I might have talked about this before. I have it at other committees, but so stop me if I haven't. I think the most important is the BC Ferries proposing or getting some ideas out to the public so you can all see them about the upgrade to our terminal. Have I talked about that before, or should I keep going?
I would keep going if I was you.
So what we looked at this in the Transportation Advisory Committee. So this was quite a while back. We looked at this, and one of the things, if you go down there and you have a look just in front of the coffee shop and behind that little tiny storage area, the kind of plasticky one, there's a whole lot of land down there that's all covered in brambles and blackberries and whatnot, and it's down low a little bit. We thought, wow, that's BC Ferries land. There's all that land there. Could we use that extra land to have a bus turnaround so that we could end up giving public transportation actually an advantage over car transportation? And so we had a meeting with BC Ferries about this back a few weeks ago. I've been working on various BC Ferries committees for many, many years, decades, and usually find them uninspiring and unhelpful, and all about why you can't do things and why that's impossible. But these folks were great. They listened carefully and they did an analysis. But unfortunately, the analysis doesn't look like there's enough room for a bus turnaround there for a bunch of reasons. But what I'd suggest you all do is have a look at the report and think of it from a transportation and GHG perspective. Because what we said was that the Transportation Advisory Committee was trying to encourage more use of transit and also walking and cycling. So trying to make sure that the changes that we make to the terminal on the Bowen Island side facilitate both of those actions. So have a look at it from that perspective, please. If you can't find it, I guess I could just send a link to everybody. Maybe I'll just agree to do that. I'll send a link to where you can find this so you can go have a look easily.
Great.
Okay, so that's it from transportation. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, information items.
Sorry, Will, I do have one thing I'd like to put on our next agenda.
Yep.
And so I am just going to go to my inbox here. So I've got a note from in my Metro Vancouver Climate Action Committee meetings, one of the members from North Van, Jessica McElroy, she is now the chair of the National Climate Caucus, which is basically came out of municipalities, a bunch of municipalities getting together and saying what can be done. And they've done a bunch of research and they've come up with a proposal that she wanted me to take to our municipality. And I know they would just simply say, well, take that to the Climate Committee first, or the Environment and Climate Action Committee first. And so I'd like to bring this on the agenda next time. And what it is, it's an organization called Help Cities Lead, and they're asking the provincial government to give local governments the ability to use 5 different policy tools on regulating emissions in buildings. So what I will do is, to prepare for the next meeting, I will write a report and send it get it to staff, so that they then can put this on the agenda with a proposed motion to council and some research docs to back it up, so you can figure out what it's all about. Okay, so basically it's just this would be probably a 20-minute item on the next week's agenda around a recommendation to council on energy efficiency regulations and actions. Okay,
great. Looking forward to that.
So I've got 4 big things on the agenda already for next week. I've got next meeting, the mitigation banking, green building standards with Daniel, 2021 work plan for this committee, and this latest item from David.
We've got stamina.
Yes.
I think the item, it'll be, I can give a quick report to explain it, but I'll have it all presented ahead of time. So if you just read it, I think it'll probably, this looks fine. Let's go for it. I don't think it should take very long.
Sounds good.
Great. All right. Next meeting to be determined by staff.
I can send a poll.
Yep.
Yep.
And adjournment is now.
Thank
you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Will.
Yep.
Thanks, Will. See you later, everybody.
Good to see everyone.
Yeah.